Welcome to Healthy Mind, Better Future, a podcast dedicated to mental wellness. We are all challenged by psychosocial struggles. Families are broken, jobs are unfulfilling, neighborhoods are unsafe. Poverty and illnesses deter us from quality of life. We're stressed, anxious, and in despair. Healthy Mind, Better Future brings awareness and relief to those with mental health challenges. It offers practical tips for managing stress and anxiety so you can positively function in society. Our podcast panelists are Dr. Adeyemi Fatoki, a board-certified family medicine and addiction specialist, Dr. Olaleye, a board-certified pediatrician and primary care physician, Dr. Kenneth Soyemi, a board-certified pediatrician and general preventive medicine physician. I'm Funmi Onayemi, your host. Good afternoon. Welcome, Dr. Olaleye, Dr. Fatoki, and Dr. Soyemi. I hope the weather 2 days ago didn't get you down too much. Well, today we'll be talking about childhood discipline. We're saying we should train our kids so that they can become good citizens later on in life. But as much as that is a good topic and it's a very concerning topic, parents are having issues with this. A lot of parents really don't know what to do, even though this is such a fundamental part of child development. Parents don't know where to begin and where to end. So, Dr. Olaleye, what should parents do? And why is discipline important? And to what extent should parents really pay attention to this concern?
Discipline, though it's often equated with punishment and control, it actually means to train or to teach. And it is a way to impart skills and knowledge. Effective discipline is very important to teach to children values and our own culture, anything that is culturally appropriate behavior that can help them grow up healthy so that they can have good self-control. It can help them make good choices in life, to really understand life application of Newton's third law of motion that states that for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. In other words, there are consequences for everything, every actions that we take. Effective discipline helps contribute to the social and emotional development of everyone by establishing boundaries and guiding them to be responsible and to learn how to differentiate between right and wrong. So they will be able to navigate through the world that is around them safely and respectfully. And so that's why I would say that it's important to discipline the children.
Which style of discipline will be most protective of a child's mental well-being?
There are diversity of opinion about that on how to discipline. Even it's not always the same between medical and secular literatures, and it's often influenced heavily by our cultural background. But overall, there is general consensus of different ways that we can group the type of discipline. There is what is called an aversive discipline. It's always involves some form of punishment. It's a punishment-based style of discipline. It's a form of negative reinforcement technique that involves imposing an undesirable outcome for a specific behavior. It could be things like spanking, scolding, yelling, name-calling. But it's generally recommended to avoid this form of discipline when we're disciplining our children. Any form of physical punishments or psychological punishments is better to avoid because they can be detrimental and they're usually not effective anyway. And children learn by imitation, especially the younger ones. You spank and yell at them. They go to daycare or preschool and they're hitting other children, they're biting them, they're yelling as well. So it can actually emphasize aggression. Better options of disciplines are maybe the little ones, timeout. when you give a child timeout, you keep your attention away from them. And generally speaking, your children want to please you and they want your attention. So withdrawing that attention from a child helps them to know that this is not an acceptable behavior. General rule of thumb is 1 minute per age. In other words, a 2-year-old go for timeout for 2 minutes, a 3-year-old for 3 minutes, something like that. Another form of effective discipline can be boundary-based discipline. Children will push the limits. They always will. But you set boundaries by tailoring rules that is appropriate to their developmental stage. Because the kind of boundaries I have for a 2-year-old is different from the one I have for a 12-year-old. You communicate clearly what the boundaries are, and you're consistent. Be firm, be consistent. You can say no this time to this action, and next time and say, I'm tired. Let him do whatever he will do. No, you have to be consistent. Otherwise, you're confusing them. There is a positive reinforcement way of discipline. It's catching them when they're being good. You give attention when they are doing good behavior. When you are always having to remind Johnny to pick up his toys after playing with them. This time, maybe you didn't remind him and he just pick them up. Recognize it, acknowledge it. Oh, I'm so proud of you, Johnny, for picking up after yourself. Give him extra attention. It's just a few seconds. Praise him, and that encourages him to do it again. And there are consequences. Another form is establishing consequences or loss of privilege. To me, I feel like some people group them separately, but I think like they're twins. It's hard to separate one from the other. That's when you separate, you set an appropriate consequences for an unacceptable behavior. Have clear and realistic consequences that you'll be able to go through with. You can say, if you do that again, you're not going to eat for a week. I mean, it's not practical. So practical consequences and follow through. Loss of privilege might be a teenager. Like if you don't do what you're supposed to do, then you can have my car key for the weekend to go to your friends over the weekend. So be clear what privilege will be lost if the desired action is not completed. Follow through. Take away the privilege that the child cares about for failing to do what they need to do.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Lale. I want to get to Dr. Soyemi on the fact that the tween and teen period, that's when parents have the most difficult time. And my question, Dr. Soyemi, is this. Why do teens go astray around that time?
The way I'll answer that question is I'll look back when I was growing up, and my friends in school, my friends at home, and how we all took different paths. So I look at 6 different things like peer pressure, social influence. Like teenagers are heavily influenced by their peer pressures, their peer groups, who can actually be positive or negative. If you have a group of friends that read and study together, and you have a group of friends that play, get involved in risky behaviors, that might have a positive or negative influence on you. The second pillar would be the identity exploration, whereby you can see adolescents, they often experiment with different roles, which might lead them to behaviors outside their family's values and expectations. We look at things like emotional struggles, mental health challenges, which could include anxiety, depression, feeling of inadequacy, may push teenagers towards very harmful behaviors such as coping mechanisms. Lack of guidance and oversight, like insufficient supervision, like parents work too much or both parents have to be out of the home to provide income for the family, can actually lead teenagers to vulnerable, poor making decisions. Family dynamics, things like family stressors such as divorce, economic hardship, lack of positive communication, like Caroline said, these can contribute to feelings of alienation and rebellion. The most important thing will be the media and technology, the games, unrestricted access to harmful content or unhealthy comparisons through social media can actually shape behaviors and expectations in damaging ways. And if you look at the statistics out there that I was able to pull up, about 85% of high school students report experiencing peer pressure. About 70% of teenage smokers attribute their smoking initiation to peer pressure. About 33% of teenage boys between ages of 15 and 17 feel pressured by their male friends to engage in sexual activity. About 40% of teenagers feel pressured to post content that portrays them positively on social media sites. So if you look at a combination of all these factors, those are the things that may cause teenagers to have problems with discipline, or your nice kid all of a sudden becomes a different teenager you do not recognize.
And when you talk about your teenager that we now cannot recognize, that brings us to Dr. Fatoki. Dr. Fatoki, this is the point where many of them are now coming to you because they're addicted to something. Maybe they're abusing substances, or they're really now in serious addiction situation. How do you help them, or how can we help them?
Patients that I see are mostly adults, but they all have some kind of childhood trauma. Like Dr. Olaleye mentioned at the beginning, abuse is different from discipline. Okay, so I deal with a lot of people who either have been abused, or majority have been abused, and also maybe not disciplined. I do see adults who throw tantrums like 2-year-olds, and they remind me, like, if someone had set limits with them when they were younger, they probably wouldn't be behaving that way as adults. There's something called an ACE questionnaire, which is our adverse childhood experiences, or events, and it covers different areas, like whether as a child you were insulted or you were cursed, whether you were physically abused, sexually abused, feeling neglected, not feeling loved, not having enough food to drink, if the parents ended up being divorced, or if someone went to prison. So those things all factor into experiences that people have. And granted that children react differently to different things, a lot of us that grew up in Nigeria during my generation, we were spanked, but we still turned out okay, but again, the spanking was not abused. I'll say 90% of the time, my parents threatened to spank you, but they never did. But every time you knew you did something wrong, once that threat came up, you behaved yourself, because you knew that if you dared them to do it, they will, but they hardly ever spanked us growing up, and something else that Dr. Olaleye mentioned, which is, it reminds me of going back to physics, which is actions and reactions are equal and opposite. When you abuse or do something bad to your child, expect that the way they are going to react is going to be similar to the same thing that you're doing to them. So for me, it's just like disciplining the children, like Dr. Soyemi and Dr. Olaleye have mentioned, rather than abuse, would lead to me having less patience and having to deal less patience with difficult adulthoods based on their childhood.
So at this time, I think we really should now talk about this. You've mentioned the discipline in Nigeria. We've mentioned maybe even in other countries. We all have different styles. So right now, let's just open this up for discussion. We have our contributor, Mrs. Dorcas Fatoki, who is joining us today to also chime in and talk to us about, discipline maybe in America as opposed to African countries.
I grew up in a Christian household, so I grew up getting spankings. I went to a Christian school up until 8th grade, so we got spankings in the Christian school as well. So I guess we were kind of brought up like you all, I suppose. And I guess most of my friends, they got spankings too, but I guess it wasn't like us in the Christian household. My mom still, believe in spankings, even the grandchildren.
Is there a fine line between abuse and discipline when it comes to that? So if we were hungry, we had our own money to buy peanuts, they're saying that it's money that was meant for Jesus that we're using for peanuts, and then you get disciplined for that, So
don't eat.
I think it's a pretty fine line, like thinking back about it, between being abused and being disciplined.
Would you say if it's corrective, it's not abuse?
It depends. Some, because of my work in the emergency room, some people say they discipline their kids, and when they come in, the kid comes in with fractures and everything. So one has to be careful. My question to everybody is, how do you deal with a very difficult kid? Because there's some kids that are difficult. So what's the fine line between discipline and taking away privileges, like Dr. Caroline said?
Every situation is unique. So what works with one child may not work with another child. Even in my own household, one of them like just does not like to be yelled at. He'll just shut down. Versus the other one, you know, that worked for him. He'll stop doing whatever he needs to do. So it just depends on which child it is.
I'll say at this time is Dr. Olaleye, you didn't tell us about getting spanked, right? But I'm suspecting, though, you didn't do anything wrong as a child.
The amount of tears that I will have produced make my parents have pity on me. And I was such a careful child because, oh my goodness, I just hated spanking. Yeah, I got spanked twice in my entire growing up time by my dad. And I remember, and each time is 2 strokes on my hand. And I remember what I did each time, and it will never happen again.
The other thing that a lot of parents do too is when you're angry, that's the time you're taking it out on your child. You know, the child does something, but then you already know that you are in an excited stage and you're angry. That's not the time to discipline a child. You know, you need to go cool off first, because otherwise that child, you're just going to go way above and beyond what you would normally have done, which is tending on abuse. You know, a child with a fractured hand is not discipline at all. You know, but a lot of times, you know, the children want to please us. They need some guidance, and you know, like Dr. Soyemi talked about some of those kids, which we've all dealt with either when we were in school or relatives that we know. There are just some kids that are like problem children. You know, no matter what you do, you know, those baby kids that nothing, but you know, I always like to get to the underlying problem. You know, I think most kids are born innocent, or all kids are born innocent. So for a child to get to that point, something went wrong. There's something that's bothering them that's not being addressed. And it's best to try to get to the root cause of that problem instead of, you know, of whipping that child over and over and just disciplining them to the point that you feel like killing them.
I don't want to kill anybody.
Is there a role culture plays discipline kids?
There are cultural differences. You know, the way even the Yorubas discipline their kids is different from the way Igbos. It's definitely different from the way people in the Western Hemisphere discipline their kids. You know, so again, you know, with our Yoruba culture, we are very respect oriented. That plays a lot into discipline. You don't call someone, you don't use O, like for someone who is older than you use S. So even with that, you know, people feel disrespected. Educated and forward thinking parents who are more likely to do that, you know, or just people who pay attention to things. So I think the culture plays a lot into it, you know, and that's why a lot of times Yorubas don't listen to their children. You know, when your children say something is, oh, you know, just shut up, or grown folks are talking, we don't want to hear any children.
What is culturally acceptable also as discipline it's different. It is culturally acceptable from where we're coming from. But a lot of our parents, some of them do it. They do it really badly, and it's bordered on abuse. But a lot did it with love, that you can tell that they just don't want a child that they have to bail out of jail. That's all they're working towards, to make sure they put you on the right path. And it hurts them more to spank you than you that they're spanking. So yeah, it is. So culture drives a lot. It's how we discipline. It's heavily influenced by our culture.
And I've seen kids whereby they will say, how I wish my parents were strict with me when I've seen it. Yeah, they will say, oh, my parents were just too lax with me. Where were they when they should have disciplined me? And I'll be like, ooh, you're saying that? I'm like, yeah. So it goes both ways, honestly.
You know, like you said, children want to be loved. They want to please. Dr. Olaleye said, it's to train and teach, not to abuse. And even for Christians, the Bible tells us that we need to train our children, I mean, so that way when they are old, they are not going to depart from the training that you give them as kids. But when you let your kids run over you and run your house, they're going to have problems and you're going to have problems, but in a situation where, the teachers can't spank, so and I know that's even a problem for the teachers in school, because when you have kids that are not disciplined at home and then you expect the school to discipline them, but the teachers' hands are tied, so there isn't really too much they can do, which is very frustrating. And then the kids are disruptive. I remember, I'll just give this quick example. When one of my sons was in high school, like his chemistry teacher, like she called us for a meeting, more or less almost crying that, your son, he's very intelligent, but at the same time, he's charismatic and he misbehaves in class, and he just lets all the other children start misbehaving and start disrespecting her. And I mean, it was tough for her because she was a Black lady. And it's more, and I told her, I said, unfortunately, I'm sorry, if this was Nigeria, I'll tell you to spank him. I said, the only thing I can do, I don't care whether he's getting an A in your class or not. If he's disrupting your class, kick him out of the class and give him a failing grade for not being in class. And I'm not going to say anything about it, but you need to kick him out and give him a failing grade. He'll know that that's not right. And I have a good friend that when he was teaching, it was one of the most frustrating things we talked about. When kids don't show up in class, but because they want to play sports, and then at the end of the day, because they fail, they are coming to him with the parents in tow. Oh, you need to give my son an A because that's the only way he can get a scholarship to play sports in college. But how do you give a child an A who failed, who never showed? I laugh about it. He said he'll tell them, okay, you want an A, I'll put an A there. Like, let me write it down. So you should have disciplined your child, told your child to go to school, stay in school and pay attention to the work. Not, all of a sudden he was going to go to college because he wants to play basketball, but the chance of succeeding is almost close to zero. Even if he makes it through into the professional leagues, because he has no discipline, he's not going to know how to spend money.
This particular group of students, they actually did a presentation. And it was so horrible because the most important part of that presentation they missed. So I failed them. And so I thought they were going to come to me and say, oh my God, what did we do? When I say I failed them, I didn't give them an F, but of course a D, which in this country, so they go, oh my God, we've never gotten a D before. I've never gotten a B before. Okay. The next thing they did, they sent letters to the department and to the chancellor. And I responded to the same letter because they copied me. I said, listen, no one will be able to change this grade. Okay? So this is what you do. You can come to me and retake, do your presentation again, or my grade will stand. This was midterms. So, they sent the letter all over the place. In no time, they started to come to me one by one. That wasn't me. I didn't do that. I don't want to hear it. Meet. So they met with me. We are going to present again. They did. And I said, look, this particular university, you have so many other universities in Illinois that are so competitive. You can't be going out and not be ready to be, competitive. So you cannot come through my class and get an A. How am I supposed to explain what you just did? So I said, so present again. They did very well this time. So my point is, they know how now to threaten you with letters to the chancellor. In our day, we didn't even know you could write to the chancellor, right? Did you know you could write to the chancellor? No. To complain about your, lecturer, instructor, professor. So it's like, how dare you? But because I was able to stand firm, they finished well, looking at all the cumulative points. My point to them was, look, you cannot come here and just mess up and think that because I'm so quiet, you can, take something above me and go to the chancellor. Nobody can change the grade. It's all on me. If I don't change it, nobody can touch it. And so you all fail this class.
Again, those are kids that the parents probably hardly told them no. They got everything they wanted. And then how dare you tell us that we got a D, because we deserve an A.
At this point, I think we really should leave some tips to parents and even those who are being disciplined that are just kind of confused as to whether their parents have disciplined them or they are being abused. What say you, Dr. Olaleye?
Well, I would say that when you discipline a child, just to recap, it's important to avoid physical and psychological punishment. It's also important to avoid holding grudges. Don't rehearse what they did wrong 10 months ago or a year ago. Don't give them silent treatment, especially when the child has already addressed the problem. So give your child a clean state once the behavior has been addressed, move on. We all make mistakes. Always be firm, be consistent, set boundaries, set it earlier before you, even with the so-called problem child, if you set the boundaries earlier and you're consistent, you're not going to have as much problem when they're older. Catch them when they're good, always let them know that they're loved unconditionally.
You know your kids, talk to them. If they don't want to talk to you, encourage them to find somebody to talk to. And usually to me, you may not like my advice, but at least listen to what I'm trying to tell you. You may not do it, but at least give yourself a chance because there's nothing that you're going to go through in life that we as your parents have not gone through. Those will be my tips. Just talk to the kids, have them talk to you, or talk to somebody they trust, and then encourage them that no matter what they're going through, we all have gone through it.
Know your kids, and when they talk to you, try and let them trust you enough to tell you things and believe them. Don't just brush them off. You know, that attitude that children are meant to be seen, have to be heard.
I definitely believe in talking.
Okay.
Talking a lot. As far as discipline goes, just to show them like what they did, point it out.
Okay.
Not just like don't just say no. Like don't tell them, like not to ask questions, because what you do is you shut them down.
Silent treatment is not good for a child. It's not good for a relationship either. It's not good in a marriage. It's not good for adults. It's not good for your grown children or your teenage children.
That is very true. And that will be a whole topic by itself soon, right?
Yes.
So thank you, everybody. We really appreciate this time with all of us. And so today we've talked about childhood discipline. Then we have never talked about childhood indiscipline. We really should come maybe after this episode. So we're saying to you, parents, that you really should love your children and learn how to discipline them in the way in which they feel protected and in which they will not be mentally damaged, if I will say, so that they can stay mentally well. Just as we say on this program, we want you to have a healthy mind so you can have a better future. Thank you, and have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your week. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Healthy Mind, Better Future. Pressures of life can get you down. Don't lose hope. Exercise your mind daily so you can function positively in society for a better future. Continue to join us as we offer tips to navigate your challenges and bring you mental wellness. Your healthy mind is key to your better future. Please subscribe and share our podcast. Someone out there needs encouragement.